Patricia had $47 in her purse. That's it. $47, 2 kids who needed her, and 15 years of marriage to a man who made sure she'd never be able to leave. She stood in the parking lot of a library, hands shaking, staring at a phone number she'd written on a receipt. One call. That's all it would take to change everything or lose everything. She had no idea which. But she dialed anyway, because staying was no longer an option. And somehow, impossibly, walking away with nothing became the path to having everything that mattered. If you've ever Googled how to leave with no money, if you've laid awake doing math that doesn't work, adding up rent you can't afford, and groceries you can't buy, and a future that seems impossible without him, this video is for you. Because what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible. But it's not. It's documented. It's real. And it's available to you right now, today, wherever you are. I'm going to show you exactly how 3 different women escaped economic traps that seemed inescapable. Patricia, who we just met with her $47. Yolanda, who was working part-time minimum wage with a 6-year-old son and a boyfriend who made sure she stayed broke. And Sandra, who hadn't worked in 10 years and had 3 kids and 0 options. The names have been changed to protect these women, but every resource, every step, every dollar amount is real. Before we go further, I need you to understand something critical. The stories you're about to hear are fictionalized composite narratives based on real experiences of American women who escaped economically abusive relationships. While the characters and specific details have been created to protect survivor privacy, every resource, timeline, and pathway I describe reflects authentic options available to survivors across the United States. These stories represent the documented journeys of thousands of women who left with nothing and rebuilt their lives through systematic use of domestic violence services and public assistance programs. What you're about to see isn't fantasy. It's a roadmap, one that's been walked before, one you can walk too. So let me tell you how Patricia made that call in the library parking lot, and what happened next. Patricia was 38 when she finally admitted to herself that her marriage wasn't just unhappy, it was dangerous. She'd been with Michael since she was 23, married at 24, pregnant with their first child at 25. Before Michael, Patricia had been a graphic designer, young and ambitious, with a portfolio she was proud of and clients who kept coming back. She loved the creative work, loved seeing her designs in the world. She met Michael at a friend's wedding. He was charming, successful in commercial real estate, confident in a way that felt solid and safe. Their first date lasted until 2 a.m, talking about everything. He told her he wanted a family, a real partnership, someone to build a life with. Patricia thought she'd found exactly what she was looking for. The first 2 years were good. Michael supported her design work, was proud when she landed big projects. But when Patricia got pregnant with Emma, Michael suggested she take some time off. Just until the baby's a little older, he said. You shouldn't be stressed during pregnancy. It made sense. Patricia agreed. Then Emma was born, and there was always a reason not to go back. Emma needs you. Childcare is so expensive, you'd basically be working just to pay for daycare. Let me handle the finances. You focus on our daughter. When their son Jake came along 2 years later, the conversation about Patricia working just stopped happening. Michael handled everything. All the accounts were in his name. Patricia had a credit card, but it was connected to his account. He'd check the statements, ask about every purchase. Not in an angry way, usually. Just concerned. That's a lot for groceries. Are you sure you're shopping smart? Do you really need new clothes? The kids need things, but you can make do, right? Over the years, Patricia lost touch with most of her design clients. Her portfolio felt outdated. She wasn't even sure she could get hired anymore. The industry had changed, software had evolved. Patricia felt stuck in place while the world moved on. By year 15, Patricia knew the marriage was abusive. Michael didn't hit her, but he controlled everything else. What she wore, where she went, who she talked to. He'd explode over tiny things, punch walls, scream until the kids were crying. Then he'd apologize, say he was stressed about work, promise to do better. But it kept getting worse. Patricia started having panic attacks. She'd lie awake calculating, running numbers in her head. If she left, where would she go? She had no money saved, no income. Her parents had passed away years ago. Her sister lived across the country with her own struggles. Patricia's friends had slowly disappeared. The natural drift that happens when someone stops returning calls, stops showing up to things because her husband doesn't like her going out. She was completely alone, and she had 2 kids. Emma was 13, Jake was 11. If Patricia left, where would they sleep? She'd looked into apartments. Even a tiny 2-bedroom in a bad part of town was $1,800 a month. She'd need first month, last month security deposit. That's $5,400 she didn't have. Plus utilities, food, clothes, school supplies. How would she even apply for an apartment with no job, no credit in her name, no rental history? The impossibility of it paralyzed her. So she stayed, and told herself maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe she was being dramatic. Maybe if she just tried harder to keep him happy, it would get better. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Patricia was folding laundry in the bedroom. Just laundry. Normal, mundane Tuesday laundry. She picked up one of Michael's shirts and noticed a button was loose. She'd need to sew it before he noticed and got angry about her not taking care of things properly. And suddenly Patricia just stopped, stood there holding that shirt with the loose button, and she thought, I am terrified of a button. I'm 48 hours away from a panic attack because a button might make my husband scream at me. This is my life. A loose button is a crisis. In that moment, standing in the bedroom with afternoon light coming through the window and a basket of laundry at her feet, Patricia saw her life with sudden, brutal clarity. This wasn't marriage. This wasn't partnership. This was captivity. And if she didn't leave, Emma would grow up thinking this was normal. Would accept this treatment from someone someday. Would teach Jake that this was how you treat someone you claim to love. Patricia couldn't let that happen. She didn't know how she'd do it, didn't have a plan or money or anywhere to go, but she knew she had to try. Patricia started with a Google search on the library computer. She couldn't search at home. Michael checked the internet history. She typed, "How to leave abusive relationship with no money." The first result was the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Patricia wrote the number on a piece of paper, tucked it in her shoe. That night, after Michael was asleep, she called from the bathroom with the shower running to cover the sound. A woman named Maria answered. Patricia whispered her situation. 2 kids, no money, no job, nowhere to go. Husband controlled everything. Maria didn't sound shocked. She'd heard this before, hundreds of times. She told Patricia about a domestic violence shelter 40 minutes away. They had space. They could take Patricia and her kids as soon as tomorrow if needed. Patricia couldn't believe it. Just like that. Just call and they'd have somewhere to sleep? Maria explained how it worked. The shelter was confidential, address protected. Michael wouldn't be able to find them. They could stay for up to 90 days. During that time, shelter advocates would help Patricia apply for assistance, find housing, look for work. They had childcare while she did intake appointments. They had counselors for the kids. They had everything she'd need to start over. The catch? She had to leave with basically nothing. A bag of clothes, important documents if she could grab them safely, that's it. No furniture, no treasured belongings, nothing that would alert Michael she was planning to go. Patricia spent 2 weeks preparing in secret. She gathered documents, birth certificates for her and the kids, social security cards, her marriage license, her old college degree, what little paperwork existed in her name. She tucked them in a folder in the back of Emma's closet. She packed a small bag, 3 days of clothes for each of them, toothbrushes, medications, Jake's inhaler, Emma's glasses. She hid it under her bed. She talked to the kids, told them enough to prepare them, but not so much they'd be terrified. We're going somewhere safe. It might feel strange at first, but it's going to be okay. Trust me. On a Wednesday morning, Michael left for work at 7:30 like always. Patricia waited until 7:45 to be sure he wouldn't come back for something he'd forgotten. Then she grabbed the bag, grabbed the documents, grabbed her kids. They walked to the bus stop 3 blocks away. Patricia's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the phone to call the shelter and say they were coming. That's when she checked her purse. $47. That's all she had to her name. $47 and 2 terrified kids and a phone number for a place she'd never seen. By 9:30 that morning, Patricia and her children were checking into the domestic violence shelter. They had a private room. Small, just 2 beds and a crib that Jake was too big for but would have to work. But it was theirs. It was safe. Michael couldn't get in. For the first time in 15 years, Patricia took a breath that didn't hurt. The next 90 days were the hardest and most hopeful of Patricia's life. The shelter had rules, structure, mandatory meetings. But they also had resources Patricia hadn't known existed. Within the first week, an advocate named Carmen helped Patricia apply for TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. It was cash assistance for families in crisis. Patricia qualified because she had dependent children and zero income. The amount wasn't huge, about $400 a month, but it was something. Carmen also helped her apply for SNAP, food assistance. That was another $500 a month in grocery help. Medicaid for health insurance. WIC for nutrition support for the kids. Each application required documentation, interviews, proof of her situation. The shelter staff guided Patricia through every form. They helped her open a bank account in her own name for the first time in 15 years. Helped her get a pay-as-you-go cell phone Michael couldn't track. Helped her enroll Emma and Jake in the school near the shelter so they wouldn't miss too much class. And they helped Patricia think about work. She hadn't had a job in 15 years. Her design skills were outdated, but the shelter had a partnership with a workforce development program. They offered free classes in updated graphic design software. Patricia signed up. 3 nights a week, while the kids did homework in the shelter's common area with volunteer tutors, Patricia sat in a computer lab relearning her craft. It was hard. She felt behind, inadequate. But slowly, she started creating again. Started remembering why she'd loved this work in the first place. After 60 days at the shelter, Carmen sat down with Patricia to talk about next steps. She'd be at the 90-day limit soon. She needed to transition to longer-term housing. Carmen told Patricia about transitional housing programs specifically for domestic violence survivors. These were apartments where women could live for up to 2 years at reduced rent, usually 30% of whatever income they had, while they got back on their feet. Patricia applied to 3 programs. 2 had waiting lists. 1 had an opening. Patricia and her kids moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a transitional housing complex. It wasn't fancy. The building was old, the carpet stained, the kitchen cabinets didn't close right. But it was theirs. Patricia had a key. Michael didn't know where they were, and the rent was $80 a month, all she could afford on her TANF and the part-time design work she'd started to pick up freelance. Patricia also worked with legal aid, free lawyers for abuse survivors. They helped her file for divorce and for child support. Michael fought it, of course, claimed Patricia had abandoned him, that she was an unfit mother for taking the kids to a shelter. But the legal aid attorney had documentation, the shelter intake forms, photos Patricia had taken over the years of holes Michael had punched in walls, of bruises on her arms when he'd grabbed her, Michael's own texts telling Patricia she was worthless, that she'd never survive without him. The judge wasn't sympathetic to Michael, ordered child support, ordered temporary spousal support while the divorce was pending, ordered Michael to stay away. 18 months after Patricia walked into that shelter with nothing but a bag of clothes and $47, she moved into her own apartment. Not transitional housing, not a shelter. An apartment she'd found herself, applied for herself, signed a lease for, with her own name. It was a 1-bedroom, small, but Emma could have the bedroom, and Patricia would take the couch until she could afford something bigger. She'd been working full-time as a designer for a small marketing firm for 6 months. The pay wasn't amazing, $38,000 a year, but combined with child support and the SNAP benefits she still qualified for, it was enough. Barely, but enough. Patricia would lie in bed that first night in her own place and think about the button, the loose button on Michael's shirt that had broken something open in her. How impossible leaving had seemed. How she'd been certain there was no way out, no path forward. And how wrong she'd been. The path existed. It was hard, required help, required using every resource available. But it existed. Patricia wanted every woman who felt trapped the way she'd felt trapped to know that. That $47 had been enough, because it wasn't about the money. It was about knowing where to call, who to ask, what resources existed. Patricia had learned all of that, and now she wanted to teach others. Now let me tell you about Yolanda. Yolanda was 31, working part-time at a Target distribution center, making $11 an hour, 25 hours a week. That was about $1,200 a month before taxes. Her rent was $950. After rent, utilities, and gas to get to work, Yolanda had maybe $200 a month for everything else: food, clothes for her 6-year-old son Marcus, unexpected expenses. It was impossible math. And she was only making it work because her boyfriend Carlos helped. Except Carlos wasn't helping. Carlos was the reason Yolanda couldn't work more hours. He didn't like Marcus's daycare, said they didn't watch him properly, insisted Yolanda had to be home when Marcus wasn't in school. Which meant Yolanda could only work during school hours. Couldn't take evening shifts that paid more. Couldn't get promoted to full-time, which would have included benefits. Carlos said it was because he cared about Marcus, wanted him to have stability. But Yolanda was starting to see it differently. Carlos wanted her dependent, wanted her unable to leave, and it was working. Yolanda had been thinking about ending things with Carlos for over a year. He wasn't physically violent, but he was controlling, manipulative, constantly putting her down. "You're lucky I'm here," he'd say. "No one else would want a woman with a kid and no money. You'd be homeless without me." And Yolanda was terrified he was right. Yolanda had grown up in foster care, aged out at 18 with nobody. She'd had Marcus at 24 with a guy who disappeared the second she told him she was pregnant. She'd been doing everything alone, barely surviving, when she met Carlos at a friend's birthday party. He'd seemed stable, had a decent job in construction, offered to help. At first it felt like rescue, then it felt like a trap. Carlos moved into Yolanda's apartment without really asking, just gradually brought more of his stuff until he lived there. Started criticizing everything. The way she cooked, the way she parented, the way she cleaned. Started monitoring her phone, wanting to know where she was all the time. Started making her ask permission to see friends, then making her feel guilty when she did. Yolanda felt herself getting smaller, quieter. Marcus was starting to act out at school. The teacher had called Yolanda in for a conference, said Marcus seemed anxious, was having trouble focusing. Yolanda knew it was because of the tension at home. Carlos and Yolanda fought constantly. "Well," Carlos yelled, and Yolanda tried to keep the peace. Marcus heard everything through the thin walls. Yolanda's breaking point came when Marcus asked her a question. They were at the park on a Saturday afternoon, Carlos at work for once, so they had space to breathe. Marcus was on the swings, Yolanda pushing him, and he said, "Mama, when I grow up, am I going to yell at people like Carlos yells at you?" Yolanda felt like she'd been punched. She stopped pushing the swing. Marcus turned around to look at her. "Is that what dads do?" he asked. Yolanda wanted to say no, wanted to explain that Carlos wasn't his dad, that real love didn't look like this. But Marcus was 6. He didn't understand nuance. He understood what he saw, and what he saw was teaching him terrible lessons. Yolanda realized in that moment that staying wasn't just hurting her. It was teaching her son that this was normal, acceptable, just how relationships worked. She had to leave. For Marcus, if not for herself. But how? She ran the numbers in her head for the 1,000th time. $1,200 a month income. Rent for even a studio in a bad area would be $700 at minimum. That left $500 for everything else. For food, utilities, gas, clothes, unexpected expenses, it wasn't enough. She'd be homeless within 3 months, unless there was help she didn't know about. Yolanda started asking questions. At Marcus's school, she talked to the counselor, mentioned casually that things were tough at home. The counselor asked gentle questions, gave Yolanda a pamphlet about domestic violence resources. Yolanda took it home, hid it in her car, read it during her lunch break at work. One of the resources listed was a local organization that helped women in abusive relationships. They had an office, a phone number. Yolanda called. A woman named Teresa answered. Yolanda explained her situation. "I'm not being hit," she said, "but I can't live like this anymore and I have no money." Teresa said the words Yolanda needed to hear. "You don't need to be hit for it to be abuse. What you're describing is emotional abuse and financial abuse. And there are resources that can help you leave." Teresa explained that Yolanda almost certainly qualified for expanded assistance because she had a dependent child and was fleeing domestic violence. TANF, SNAP, Medicaid, childcare subsidies. Programs Yolanda had heard of but assumed she didn't qualify for because she technically had a job. But Teresa explained that the income limits were higher than Yolanda thought. especially with a child. And as a domestic violence survivor, there were emergency provisions that could fast-track her applications. Teresa also told Yolanda about something called rapid rehousing. It was a program specifically for people at risk of homelessness, including domestic violence survivors. The program would pay security deposit and first month's rent for a new apartment, then help subsidize rent for up to a year while Yolanda got stabilized. Yolanda couldn't believe it. She'd never heard of any of this. Teresa laughed, but not unkindly. "Most people haven't," she said. "These programs don't advertise. You have to know to look. That's why we're here, to help you navigate." Over the next 2 weeks, Yolanda met with Teresa 3 times. They filled out applications. TANF, approved for $370 a month. SNAP, approved for $450 a month. Child care subsidy, approved, which meant Marcus could go to after-school care for free, which meant Yolanda could finally work full-time. Medicaid, approved, which meant Marcus's asthma inhalers would finally be covered. Rapid rehousing, approved, which meant Yolanda could afford to leave. She applied for full-time hours at Target. Got them. That bumped her to 40 hours a week at $12.50 an hour, $2,000 a month before taxes. Combined with the assistance, it was enough. Barely, but enough. Yolanda left on a Monday morning. Carlos had an early shift on Mondays, left at 5 a.m. As soon as he was gone, Yolanda started packing. She'd secretly moved their important documents to her car over the past week. Birth certificates, social security cards, Marcus's school records. Now she packed clothes, Marcus's favorite stuffed bear, his school books. She woke Marcus up, told him they were going on an adventure. "Are we coming back?" he asked. Yolanda said, "No, baby. We're going somewhere new, somewhere just for us." By 9 a.m., Yolanda was at the Housing Authority office signing a lease for a 1-bedroom apartment. The rapid rehousing program covered the security deposit and first month. The rent was $700 a month, and the program would cover half for the first year. That meant Yolanda only had to pay $350, which she could do. Barely, but she could do it. They moved in that day. It was tiny, much smaller than the apartment she'd shared with Carlos. But it was theirs. Carlos wasn't there. Marcus had his own space, a corner of the bedroom with his toys and books. That first night, as Yolanda tucked Marcus into bed, he said, "Mama, it's quiet here." Yolanda realized he was right. No yelling, no tension, just quiet. She started crying. Marcus hugged her. "It's okay, Mama," he said. "We're okay now." The first few months were hard. Money was incredibly tight. Even with the assistance, Yolanda was choosing between gas and groceries some weeks. The car broke down, and she had to borrow money from a coworker to fix it. Marcus got sick and missed school, which meant Yolanda missed work and lost pay. But they made it. And slowly, things got better. Yolanda picked up overtime shifts, got a small raise, started saving, just $20 a month at first, but something. After 6 months, she was able to enroll in Target's management training program. After a year, she got promoted to team leader. After 18 months, her rent subsidy ended, which meant she had to pay the full $700, but by then she was making more, could afford it. Marcus was thriving. His teacher said he was more focused, happier. He'd made friends. He wasn't asking about Carlos anymore. Yolanda was working with a therapist at the domestic violence organization, processing what she'd been through, learning to recognize red flags so she didn't end up in another controlling relationship. She was rebuilding her life piece by piece. And she wanted every woman trapped in impossible math to know. The math changes when you access the right help. That $1,200 a month wasn't enough on its own. But $1,200 plus assistance plus subsidized housing plus childcare help? That was enough. That was freedom. Now let me tell you about Sandra. Sandra was 46, hadn't worked in 10 years, had 3 kids aged 8, 11, and 14. She'd been with Robert for 16 years. He controlled everything. All the money, all the accounts, all the decisions. Sandra had no access to any of it. Robert gave her cash for groceries, demanded receipts, questioned every purchase. If she asked for money for the kids' school activities or new clothes, he'd interrogate her. Why do they need that? Are you sure you're not wasting money? Most of the time, he'd say no, just to prove he could. Sandra felt like a prisoner in her own life. But leaving seemed impossible. She had 3 kids, no job, no money saved, no credit in her name at all. Robert had made sure of that. Everything was in his name only. Sandra had looked into apartments. Even low-income housing had wait lists years long. How was she supposed to get her kids out when she couldn't even afford the application fees? She felt hopeless. Stayed for years just because the alternative seemed worse. Sandra's life before Robert felt like a different person's story. She'd been a dental hygienist, good at her job, made decent money. She'd been independent, confident, had her own apartment and her own life. She met Robert at 30. He'd seemed responsible, stable. A middle manager at an insurance company. They got married quickly, had their first baby within a year. Robert encouraged Sandra to quit her job after the baby came. "Stay home," he said. "I make enough for both of us. You should be with our child." It made sense at the time. Sandra agreed. But once she quit, the dynamic shifted. Robert started making all the financial decisions without consulting her, started questioning her spending, started treating her like she was his dependent, not his partner. When Sandra mentioned going back to work once their youngest started school, Robert got angry, said she'd been out of the field too long, wouldn't be able to get hired, would just embarrass herself trying. Said the kids needed her home. Really, Sandra realized later, Robert needed her dependent. Needed her with no options, no escape routes. It worked. For 10 years, Sandra felt completely stuck. The breaking point for Sandra came during her daughter Lily's 8th grade parent-teacher conference. Lily was struggling in school, and the teacher gently suggested that Lily seemed stressed. Maybe some family counseling might help. Robert was furious. Blamed Sandra for not managing the kids better, not keeping the house together, not being a good enough mother. That night, he screamed at Sandra for over an hour, called her useless, worthless, a failure as a mother and a wife. The kids heard everything from their rooms. After Robert stormed off to bed, Lily came downstairs. "Mom," she said, "you don't have to stay with him. We'd be okay without him. I'd rather live in a car than listen to him scream at you." Sandra started crying. Her 14-year-old daughter was trying to protect her, telling her it was okay to leave. And Sandra realized Lily was right. Even if they had nothing, even if they struggled, it would be better than this. She didn't know how she'd do it, but she had to try. For her kids, if not for herself. Sandra started researching from the library computer, found the National Domestic Violence Hotline number, called from a payphone so Robert couldn't trace it, explained her situation. 3 kids, no income, no resources, nowhere to go, but she had to get out. The advocate she spoke to, named Jamie, told Sandra about legal aid. Free lawyers for domestic violence survivors. Jamie explained that even though Sandra hadn't worked in years, she had legal rights. Robert had a legal obligation to support their children. Sandra could file for divorce, could ask the court for child support and spousal support. But Sandra said what she was thinking. That takes time. Court cases take months. What am I supposed to do in the meantime? Where do I live while the legal process happens? Jamie explained the pathway. Shelter first if needed, or if Sandra thought she could do it safely, she could file for legal separation and request temporary support orders while still technically living in the house. Or she could leave, go to a shelter, file for emergency custody and support. Each option had risks and benefits. Jamie helped Sandra think through what would work best for her specific situation. Sandra decided to do it the legal way first. She contacted legal aid, got an attorney named Rosa. Rosa explained that Sandra had a strong case. Robert made a good income, around $90,000 a year. The court would almost certainly order him to pay child support for all 3 kids, which in their state would be about $1,800 a month. And because Sandra had been out of the workforce for 10 years at Robert's insistence, taking care of their home and children, she'd likely be awarded spousal support as well, at least temporarily, while she got retrained and back into the workforce. Combined, Rosa estimated Sandra could be looking at $25,000 to $3,000 a month in support. That was enough to live on. Not comfortably, but enough. Rosa filed the paperwork, requested temporary support orders, requested Robert be ordered to continue paying the mortgage on the family home while the divorce was pending, so Sandra and the kids could stay there. The court granted it. Suddenly, Sandra had income. Not in her hand yet, the first payment would take a few weeks to process, but legally ordered income. She also applied for assistance. With the temporary support orders, she qualified for SNAP, for Medicaid, for childcare assistance once she started looking for work. Sandra's legal process took 18 months. It was brutal. Robert fought everything, tried to claim Sandra had been unfaithful, that she was an unfit mother, that she'd been hiding money. None of it was true, and Rosa had documentation proving it. Eventually, the court ruled in Sandra's favor. Child support, $1,900 a month. Spousal support, $800 a month for 5 years to give Sandra time to retrain and reestablish her career. Division of marital assets. Sandra got half of everything, including half of Robert's retirement account. When the divorce was finalized, Sandra had enough money to put a deposit on a rental house. Small, 3-bedroom, but enough space for her and her kids. She'd also enrolled in a community college program to update her dental hygiene license. The program was 9 months long. Sandra had to take out student loans to pay for it, but it was an investment in her future. After she graduated, she got hired at a dental office. Starting pay was $22 an hour, which at full-time was about $46,000 a year. Combined with child support, that was around $65,000 a year, more than enough to support herself and her kids. 2 years after Sandra left Robert, she was living in that rental house, working as a hygienist again, saving money for the first time in 16 years. Her kids were doing better. Lily had started excelling in school again, was even thinking about colleges. The younger two were calmer, less anxious. Sandra had started dating again, cautiously, taking it slow, learning to recognize healthy relationship dynamics after so many years in dysfunction. She'd also started volunteering with the legal aid organization that had helped her, answering phones on the domestic violence helpline. She wanted to tell other women what she'd learned, that even when you think you have no options, even when you think you have no way to support yourself, there are resources. There are laws that protect you. There's a pathway out. It's not easy. It requires help, requires humility to ask for assistance, requires patience to navigate systems that are slow and complicated. But it's possible. Sandra was living proof. She'd started with $0, 0 job prospects, and 3 kids. 2 years later, she had a career, a home, and a future, because she'd learned where to ask for help. And someone had answered. You've heard 3 very different stories. Patricia, who started from zero and built everything through shelters and workforce programs. Yolanda, who leveraged public assistance and rapid rehousing to escape with her son. Sandra, who used the legal system to ensure her abuser had to support the children and give her time to retrain. 3 different pathways, but one pattern emerges clearly. None of them knew these resources existed until they asked for help. That's the cruelest part of the economic trap. The help exists, but it's hidden. You have to know where to look. You have to know the right questions to ask. So let me tell you where to look. Let me give you the roadmap these 3 women followed. Because if you're watching this video, if you're trapped in impossible math, if you're convinced there's no way out, you need to know what they learned. First, every woman in these stories accessed help through one central resource. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, free, confidential. You can call from any phone. If he checks your call history, call from work, from a friend's phone, from a payphone if you can find one, from the library. When you call, they'll connect you to local resources specific to your area. shelters in your city or county, legal aid organizations, assistance programs. They know what exists where you live. They'll give you specific referrals, phone numbers, addresses. This one call is the handle on the door. Everything else flows from here. Second, understand the timeline. This isn't overnight. This isn't call today and be independent tomorrow. Patricia's journey from shelter to independence took 18 months. Yolanda's took 2 years. Sandra's legal case took 18 months plus 9 months of school. But here's what's important. Every single one of them, if you'd asked them the day before they left, would have said it was impossible. Would have said there was no way. Would have told you all the reasons they couldn't do it. And they would have been wrong. Because the resources existed, they just didn't know about them yet. The timeline is long, but it's finite. 18 months sounds like forever when you're trapped. But it's 18 months to freedom versus staying trapped forever. The math changes when you frame it that way. Third, the common resources across almost every state. These programs have different names and slightly different eligibility requirements depending where you live, but most states have versions of these available. TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. Cash assistance for families with children in crisis. Amounts vary by state, usually between $300 and $700 per month depending on family size and state. You apply through your state's social services department. Patricia got $400 a month. Yolanda got $370. It's not enough to live on alone, but it's a foundation. SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Help with groceries. Most families with children and low or no income qualify. Amounts depend on household size and income, usually between $400 and $800 per month for a family. Both Patricia and Yolanda got around $450 to $500. Sandra qualified even with her temporary support orders because the orders took time to actually start paying. This means you can feed your kids while you're getting everything else sorted out. Medicaid. Health insurance for low-income families. If you qualify for TANF, you almost certainly qualify for Medicaid. This is critical because you can't work if you're sick, and your kids need to be healthy to stay in school. All 3 women qualified immediately. Childcare subsidies. Help paying for daycare or after-school care so you can work or go to school. Requirements vary by state, but most have programs specifically for low-income families and domestic violence survivors. Yolanda's childcare subsidy was what allowed her to go from part-time to full-time work. Without it, she'd still be trapped at 25 hours a week. Rapid rehousing programs, help with deposit and rent when you're at risk of homelessness. Some are specifically for domestic violence survivors. These programs typically cover security deposit and first-month rent, then subsidize rent on a sliding scale for 6 months to 2 years. Yolanda's program covered her deposit plus half her rent for a year. That subsidy was the difference between possible and impossible. Transitional housing. Longer-term housing specifically for domestic violence survivors, usually up to 2 years at very reduced rent, around 30% of your income. Patricia lived in transitional housing for over a year, paying $80 a month while she built up her income and credit to qualify for a regular apartment. Fourth, legal resources. If you've been married, if you have kids together, you have legal rights even if you have no income. This is critical to understand. Child support is legally mandated. The amount is calculated based on his income and number of children according to your state's formula. It's not optional, not a favor, not something you have to negotiate. It's the law. He made those children. He's legally required to support them financially, even if you're not together. Sandra got $1,900 a month for 3 kids. That alone was enough to keep them housed and fed. Spousal support, sometimes called alimony, is possible if you've been out of the workforce because of the marriage, especially if he encouraged or required you to stop working. Courts recognize that as economic dependency that entitles you to support while you retrain and get back on your feet. Sandra got $800 a month for 5 years. That gave her breathing room to go back to school, to slowly rebuild her career without panic. Division of assets. If you were married, you're entitled to half of what was accumulated during the marriage. even if it's only in his name. Even if you didn't work. The house, the cars, the retirement accounts, savings, investments. Half of it is legally yours. Sandra got half of Robert's retirement account. That gave her a financial cushion she never thought she'd have. Legal aid organizations exist in every state to help you navigate this. They're free. You don't pay unless you win a settlement, and even then it's capped. They're specifically for people who can't afford attorneys. Google legal aid plus your city or county name, or ask the domestic violence hotline for a referral. Rosa, Sandra's attorney, was legal aid. She fought Robert's expensive private attorney and won because the law was on Sandra's side. You don't need money to access justice. You just need to know where to ask. And finally, domestic violence shelters. I know the word shelter sounds scary, sounds desperate, sounds like rock bottom. But here's the truth that Patricia learned. Shelters are not what you think. They're safe, clean, private spaces. You have your own room, your own space for your kids. They have staff who are trained and kind and have seen your situation 1,000 times before. They don't judge, they help. They have resources, connections, people whose entire job is helping women in exactly your situation figure out next steps. They have partnerships with workforce programs, with legal aid, with housing authorities. They know how to navigate the systems, and they're temporary. Usually 90 days maximum, a bridge from trapped to free. Patricia lived in a shelter for 3 months. Her kids adjusted. They were safe. They had counselors to talk to about the scary parts. They had a community of other kids going through similar things so they didn't feel alone. It wasn't ideal, but it was infinitely better than staying in a home where they heard their mother being screamed at every night. So here's what you do if this is you. If you're watching this video because you've been searching how to leave with no money, if you're lying in bed right now calculating impossible math and coming up with no way out, here are your 3 steps. These are the exact steps Patricia, Yolanda, and Sandra took. They work. They're replicable. You can do them starting today. Step 1. Gather information. This takes 1 phone call and about 20 minutes. Call the National Domestic Violence Hotline. 1-800-799-7233. Do it when he's not around. Do it from a safe phone he doesn't monitor. Tell them your situation. Tell them you have no money, you have kids, you have nowhere to go, but you need to leave. They will not judge you. They will not tell you what to do. They will give you options. They'll tell you about shelters in your area, legal aid, assistance programs, workforce training, everything that exists where you live. Write down the information. Don't try to remember it. Write it down. If you can't write it at home because he might find it, save it in your phone under a fake contact name. Or email it to yourself at a new email address he doesn't know about. Or just call back when you need the information again. They'll help you again. This step is information gathering only. You're not committing to anything. You're just learning what's possible. Do it today. Step 2. Gather documents. This step takes longer, maybe a few weeks, and requires you to be careful and safe. You need certain documents to access most assistance programs and to file legal paperwork. Birth certificates for you and your kids, social security cards for everyone, your marriage certificate if you're married, any financial documents you can access safely, bank statements, tax returns, pay stubs if you or he work, any documentation of abuse you have, text messages where he's threatened you or put you down, emails, photos of damage he's caused to property or injuries he's caused to you. Medical records if he's hurt you and you sought treatment. Make copies of everything. Don't take originals if he'll notice they're missing. Scan documents with your phone and email them to yourself or take photos. Some women create a secret email account just for this, something like a random name he wouldn't connect to you. Upload everything there. Or store physical copies somewhere he can't access. A friend's house, your workplace, a safety deposit box if you can get one. The domestic violence organization in your area can sometimes store documents for you. This step is crucial because without these documents, accessing assistance is much harder. Do it slowly and carefully. Don't risk your safety, but gather what you can. Step 3. Make the call. When you're ready, when you have the information and documents. When you've reached the point where staying is more dangerous than the fear of leaving, make the call. To the shelter, to legal aid, to the domestic violence organization in your area that the hotline referred you to. Say these words: I need to leave and I need help. I have no money. That's it. That's all you have to say. They'll take it from there. They'll ask questions about your situation to figure out what resources you qualify for. They'll help you make a safety plan. They'll tell you when to leave, what to bring, where to go. If you're going to a shelter, they'll give you the address and tell you how to get there safely. If you're filing legal paperwork first, they'll walk you through that process. If you're applying for assistance, they'll help you fill out forms. They'll be with you through every scary step. You won't be alone. This step takes courage. More courage than anything else you've ever done. But thousands of women have done it. Women with less money than you, more kids than you, fewer options than you, more obstacles than you. And they made it. You can too. The economic trap is real. The fear that you can't survive without him, that you'll be homeless, that you'll lose your kids because you can't provide for them, that fear is powerful and it's by design. And he knows that. He's been using that fear to keep you trapped. He's been telling you that you're worthless, that you can't make it on your own, that no one would help you, that you'd end up on the street. He's been lying. The resources exist, the pathways exist, the help exists. It's hidden, yes. You have to look for it, have to ask for it, have to navigate complicated systems to access it. But it's there. And women with nothing have accessed it and used it to build everything. Patricia started with $47 and 2 kids. 18 months later, she had a full-time job, her own apartment, independence. Yolanda was making $1,200 a month, trapped by impossible math. 2 years later, she's a team leader at Target, raising her son in peace. Sandra hadn't worked in 10 years, had 3 kids, and 0 options. 2 years later, she's a dental hygienist again with a rental house and savings in the bank. They all thought it was impossible. They were all wrong. The door exists. You just need someone to show you where the handle is. If you're in this situation, please hear me. You're not trapped. You're being told you're trapped. There's a difference. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is the handle. 1-800-799-7233. Call them. Start the conversation. Find out what resources exist in your area. Make a plan. And when you're ready, when you've gathered your courage and your documents and your determination, leave. The math will work out. Not perfectly, not easily, not without struggle and sacrifice and hard months. But it will work. Because you'll have help. Because resources exist. Because there are people whose entire jobs are helping women in exactly your situation. Because you deserve a life where you're not calculating impossible numbers in the dark. Where you're not teaching your children that this is normal. Where you're not losing yourself piece by piece to someone who uses your financial dependence as a weapon. You deserve safety. You deserve dignity. You deserve freedom. And it's available to you. Right now, today. Make the call. If this video helped you, if it gave you information you needed or hope you'd lost, please subscribe to this channel. Every week I share stories like these. Real patterns, real dangers, real solutions. Because knowledge is safety. Understanding is power. And you deserve both. The economic trap can be escaped. These 3 women proved it. Thousands more have proved it. And you can too. You can leave. Even with no money. Even with kids. Even with no job and no place to go. You can leave. The pathway exists. Walk it.